Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's show. Today we have Christopher Hoyer with us, retired Phoenix PD, author of the book, and we also have Chris Gregorio with us, active law enforcement. And Chris, Christopher, I want to kind of start with you on, you know, I was reading your book and, going into everything where law enforcement really wasn't what you set out for. So, kind of tell us a story about how it came to be on getting into it.
Well, I was a first generation guy. I just decided one day that I didn't want to be laying carpet anymore, and I could picture myself at 40 years old trying to roll around in carpet and doing all the bad stuff, and decided that chasing bad guys, carrying a gun, driving as fast as I want was really appealing to me. So, in fact, when they asked me in my background investigation why I want to be a cop, I told him that very thing, and he's like, "Well, wait a second, we might want to just slow you back down here a little." And so when it came time to answer the question for the brass, it was more on the side of, well, I want to protect my community, make it safer for my daughter to grow up in. Truth is, even after, almost 20 years of being on the street, it was still that same answer. I just had a ball chasing bad guys. So
Awesome. And then so, in the book, when that day comes, training for the fight, so there's so much that's entailed in there from, beginning, while you're in active, and then, what kind of like led up into the end. And, we all kind of sit on the sidelines now and we kind of hear the certain things that are aimed at law enforcement today. And with you, living your life, being active, and then, retiring and kind of seeing I don't want to say progression, it's more or less like a digression of, how law enforcement is viewed today and the hardships that law enforcement across the country face today. What are your views on, how different it was from when you were in opposed to like what you see today?
well, when I got on, that was the to transition from the thump the bad guys to the kinder, gentler thing, and we're told, it's no longer coffee and donuts, now it's bagels and these kinds of things, and which was all fine, and it really wasn't that way for very long because we were still. I got hired on in '97, and it was still a time when you could still chase bad guys and do a lot of fun stuff. And I have seen it progressively get worse over the years, of course, like most of the country has. And my first belief is that we let so many citizen groups run our police departments. My former agency is going through that exact thing right now. And to be perfectly honest with you, the way my agency was promoting folks wasn't off of their merits; it was off of their test taking abilities. And so then they weren't promoting leaders, which you can plainly see is going to start turning into a big problem when you get guys that have been on the street for 2 or 3 years. Next thing you know, they're running a squad of guys that have 20 years on. Sometimes it works. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of really great supervisors out there. But when you get guys that don't have the experience to run a squad and know what they need to really do in real life, everything starts to fall apart. So
100%. It's almost like engineers. They know what it looks like on paper, but they're not the ones actually building the bridges or having to run into the different things that you face in real life.
right, all right.
So, and then now, Chris, with you being active, and especially being in the Northwest territory, law enforcement today, I know is kind of facing a lot of scrutiny. And, how has it changed since you've been with the force till, today, actively engaging in your career?
I'll have to echo a lot of what Chris has said. The rules were, I guess, for lack of better terms, were a lot looser 15, 18, 20 years ago than they are now. And I won't pretend to speak about whether I think it's right or wrong. I've also been a military guy for most of my life. And I understand that the
Thank you.
rules change, rules of engagement change. And I think most cops would feel this way that all we want to do is serve. We want to serve. We want to protect. We want to help our community. And a large part of that is by chasing bad guys and things like that. But in our core, in our heart, it's all about service. It's about selflessness. And with the rules evolving and changing, I would say that your frontline officer, all they really want to know is what the rules are to be very clear so that we can follow them. I think that we all understand we're not in a position as the line officers to make those decisions of policy and rules. Um, and if they change, we just need to know what they are, what the expectations are, that so we can put ourselves and as supervisors can put our subordinates in a position to succeed and to go home safely every night.
100%. And then now, with that being said, now Christopher, I know that kind of in the book and feeding off of that right there to where there are moments that we can't prepare for, no matter how much training we receive, no matter how much mentally we try to prepare ourselves, physically prepare ourselves, and it's like today you see people like, oh well, maybe they should be educated more in the books and stuff like that. There's things that books are never going to teach you. There's things that books are never going to prepare you for in real life. And I don't know if you kind of, I mean, you don't have to get into detail about that day, but mentally, like going in, you know, you're prepared, but then when that moment happens, I mean, how did that take you at the moment? If you don't mind sharing, I mean, if you don't want to go in detail too much, but
Oh no, absolutely, absolutely. In fact, I love talking about these kinds of things because I know that somebody out there is going to hear something and say you're either full of it or yes, that makes sense, and I'm going to take it to the next level for whatever it is that they need. I can tell you from my experiences, um, Phoenix was one of the most highly trained agencies, and I've been around the country. I've seen a lot of guys and trained with a lot of guys, and our agency trained very, very well. And I'm just happy than I can be that I was so well trained when I got out on the street and finally went solo. And from all of the training I went through, from getting hired through the academy, through FTO, I had a really good FTO, really hard on me, which was good for me. And all the experiences that I had when I was first getting hired on and on the street definitely prepared me for the future. However, just like you said, until you actually see it in person, there's things you just can't prepare for. Unfortunately, my very first shooting, I knew the reality of it, but when the guy pulls a gun and I've got to shoot and kill him, and then next thing you know, a couple seconds later, I got to pull the guy out of a car and try to save his life. That's not something you can be taught. You can be told, but until you actually have to experience that in real life, that's something you're not going to really be able to prepare yourself for. So,
and then how does that play affect on not just yourself, but the brothers and everything else, with the force, those that were there that day, and just everybody as a whole. I mean, it's anytime we have a fallen brother and things like that, we kind of take it to heart, and it affects everybody as a whole. How did that change the outlook or the comradeship? Did it bring the force closer, or people divided, or you know where I'm going with this? Or
absolutely, I'm going to say yes to that. Yes to both sides, because you've got, in my time on between 97 and 2018, we buried 16 in the line of duty. I retired in 2018, and we've now buried 3 since I left. All these are all guys that showed up to work and never went home. So it definitely brings us closer as a tight knit community. Unfortunately, on the flip side of that, you've got guys that, and I mean, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I've been that guy too, where you're not even on the scene and you're explaining all of the things that went wrong on that scene. Well, I can tell you from living experience that the scenes that I've been involved with, my critical incidents, I was there pulling the trigger, and I still can't remember half the stuff that I did or that I didn't do. You weren't even there, and you're telling me what I did wrong. It's like, wait a second, how does that work? So that's very common with the law enforcement community. Back me up on that one, Chris, if you would, because I think that we like to judge and well, I would have done it this way. I would have done it this way. And this guy doesn't know what he's doing. Well, okay, well, put yourself in that exact same situation and then come talk to me,
Always easier from the sidelines.
Exactly. So.
And then so now, Chris, with, like today, again, talking about how things change, because things have changed dramatically. I mean, beyond belief, actually, with I mean, the way that, they're trying to push individuals on how you have to, detain, suspects, or they're trying to change, the rules, if you will, that, the rules of engagement have changed completely to where it kind of puts you at a disadvantage. I mean, realistically, I mean, people don't want to see it like that, but realistically, when you change rules of engagement on, how you in the moment, like Christopher was just saying, you can't put yourself in that situation because every situation is going to be different. Every domestic dispute is going to be different. Every traffic stop is going to be different. So, changing that rules of engagement to where now you're the one that has to tiptoe in on a whole different sense rather than tiptoeing in, just knowing that there's a risk there. How does that change the game today for you on those rules of engagement, if you will?
I think to start off with, at its core level, I'd like to recognize it on every single call that you're on, or anytime you're dealing with somebody, a human being, you're behind the power curve. Our profession is inherently reactive. Even as much as we want to say we're doing proactive police work and things, everything that we do is reactive. If we're doing proactive police work of going and stopping people, we're reacting to other people's actions. So we're inherently behind the power curve. Um, some of these rules can put us at more disadvantage and decrease officer safety, no doubt. But I think that the key to that, and again, we don't get to make these rules. Society does. Our communities that we serve make these rules, whether we agree with them or not. So it's in our best interest to figure out, again, exactly what the rules are, what the expectations are, and apply our training the best we can. And I think to Chris's point, I think that it's super critical that we very much analyze all of these critical incidents so that we can learn anything and every small, minute thing that we can from them to make us safer and to make people that we're dealing with safer. But I think that within that analyzation of things, sometimes the word that gets lost in that is reasonableness. Was what you did reasonable within the totality of the circumstances of occurrences that happened? Not whether you could have gone left or could have gone right, you should have peeked over, or you should have ducked. Those are all very important training questions, I think, to have, so that the next incident, and there's always going to be a next incident, that your fellow officer or and someone like Chris's position has been in multiple critical incidents, he's more safe for that next one. So again, I think it's very critical to be, or very important to be critical of those things, to learn from them, but to keep in the confines of, was everything that you did within good faith, and was it reasonable at the time with everything that you knew at that moment? Um, and I think that another thing that gets lost is we're reforming the rules of law enforcement. There's a lot of training that has to happen to bring it back up to that level so that we can still be safe. It's not like they change the rules and there's a magic switch where everything obviously changes. Because as we train, why do we train thousands and thousands of reps? So that things become muscle memory and you're more reactive and it takes less time for you to think and process. Something called the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, and act, right? We want to lessen that time frame. And is where everybody's short staffed and funding's cut, what's some of the first things that go? That's training, right? We have to man up and woman up and put the belts on and go work because we're so short staffed. So the training, because of due to staffing and due to funding, is going to go down. So it's going to take even longer to adequately get our officers on a playing field that's in conjunction with the new mandates, if you will.
Perfect. I mean, that was you sound like a professor there. Seriously, no, I'm being dead serious though. I mean, because like realistically, it's and even with training, because it's a lot of times training is based on the orthodox, of hey, these are the possible scenarios, but are they really the possible scenarios? Because you're always going to have that unorthodox individual that you have to encounter every day, because then you have the factors of drugs, you have the factors of, when you have somebody that's especially like domestic disputes, they could be going through something and that rationale isn't going to be the same as it would be if they wouldn't be having that, confrontation with their spouse, loved one, significant other, whatever the case may be. So now their rationale is not there. So now that takes their reaction to make it, orthodox. And, as you said before, action is always faster than reaction. So as law enforcement, if society or government or anybody is placing more restrictions on you as a whole, now your reaction just slow down, which increases their action. So when you're facing a suspect, if you have to hesitate now, that hesitation factor is always going to be the critical factor. And I know they say that you're not even supposed to use like fatal force or anything else unless there's imminent danger there. Well, what's the definition of imminent danger? There's people in this world that can literally kill somebody with their bare hands. I mean, you being military, that. There are literally people that can kill you with their bare hands. So what is considered imminent danger? I mean, if somebody's raising their voices or coming at me or, coming at you, let's say, it's where is that point to where your action can be faster than your reaction would be? And that's the decision that, everybody on the sidelines can say that, oh, you could have made a better decision. But when it comes time for action and reaction and you deciding, hey, is my life, worth losing if I can't stop it right now? So, I mean, there's always going to be, fatal force. And because of how much media pushes that, when you look at real numbers opposed to the overall good being done, it is so minuscule that it's not even really a factor. I don't want to say death isn't a factor, but, they put it on such a high scale to where it takes away and it clouds the good that you have done in the past and, that other law enforcement, entities are doing every day that they go out there. Like for 2019, there were only 989 fatal force incidents out of thousands upon thousands upon thousands of incidents. Is that high? I mean, some may look at it as high, but nationwide, 900, I mean, not even 1,000 fatalities. I think that's a pretty good number, actually. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. That's a good number out of the tens of thousands of run-ins. And that's where society gets that fogged mind, like, oh my God, this happened. It did, but it's gonna happen. And if we can't accept that, it's what would happen if it didn't happen? How many other lives would have been lost rather than that one? And it's everybody hates to hear the greater good speech, but at times is the greater good being served? So I know that there's so many different restrictions being put on there, but I love how you define that because the training is important, but if that training is not being provided, and then again, it's like the factors always change every day. New drugs come out, new different environments come out and things like that to where, how much do those restrictions come into play on training received or, training lost basically. So like, and Christopher, so, how much difference have you seen from while you were active till today? Because I know you're still kind of in the game, but because you kind of share some of the things that you went through to kind of, and like, Chris just made a great point on, when you're kind of limited on that, having the veterans that, and you having so many of those instances, it's a blessing sometimes, like a lot of times the tragedies, I go through is a blessing because of what I'm able to provide to another individual. And I think that, what you have done, writing the book when that day comes, it's a blessing that I don't really want to say it's a blessing you went through that, but it's a blessing that is beautiful that you were able to take that tragedy and turn it around, that you're able to give. I mean, to take the time to write that book, to be able to take the time to understand that book right there is going to help with other individuals to actually ready themselves for real life. I mean, we watch TV, cops and robbers, but it's like that real life instance being like put there, are you really ready for that? Right. So, I mean, how much has it changed from, what you've seen before and now when you kind of go in there and kind of provide the insight, the training of what you've seen before, how much has that changed?
It's changed a lot. It's changed a ton. And I think it's not necessarily just the public's view of how we're operating, but it's a generational thing as well. Because I can't tell you how many of these younger guys that come out and they're on fire and they think they're going to change the world and all these kinds of things. And it's great. And I was the same guy when I started off. I was a little bit older, had a little more life experience than a lot of guys did. But when you face the reality of what you're actually going to be doing, i.e. going hands-on with people and having to face, use of force review boards and these kinds of things, and then you realize that, well, it's not like Lethal Weapon where you go shoot 3 or 4 guys and then come back the next day and that's it. It's a tremendously complex profession, to say the least. And I mean, it's a fire hose of information that you need to that just gets shoved down your throat. And we all know that more often than not, no matter what we do, it's going to be scrutinized on some level. And that's not necessarily a negative thing. You get involved in some kind of a critical incident, whether it happens to be, and next you've got your internal affairs guys, you've got homicide, you've got the lawyers, you've got the citizens, you've got, again, a use of force review board. Then you've got, some lawyer trying to get in on it. And then God forbid somebody loses their life, then a medical examiner's got a hand in the whole thing. And that's a thing that happens. And this is the model that I use. I take a pen like this and I hold it up to about here and then I drop it to the floor. And that's maybe a second and a half, 2 at best, that you've got time to make a critical decision on something that's going to cost you your life or cost somebody else their life. And then it's going to take, like in my last one in 2016, it took 2 years almost for them to come back that we were all in policy of what we did. 2 years on a decision that took me, 2 seconds to decide, so it's very, very difficult. And I know I'm getting a little bit off track with that one.
No, you're definitely not getting off track. I mean, that's kind of where I'm going with this too, because that's what matters,
Yeah, it's very, I know there's a ton of my buddies right now that I still talk to on a regular basis. In fact, we just got back from Arizona yesterday and talking to some of these guys, and they're like, I know that I'm never going to pull the trigger. I already know that. Well, how can you say that? You don't know that, because they think that the aftermath is not going to be worth them risking pulling the trigger. And I'm going to tell you guys right now, you cannot be out on the street with that kind of a mentality. You just can't, because what's that going to do? Going to cause hesitation. And what is that going to do? It's going to cause somebody to get killed. That's probably not on the right side of the law, and it's never going to work the way it's supposed to. If you hesitate because you think what's going to go wrong, you're going to probably get killed. That's just a fact. So, and I hope that I'm wrong on that, but I've seen it happen before. So
you're not even close to being wrong. Like I do I study behavior analysis. That's my bachelor's in behavior analysis and everything. And hesitation factor is key in any decision that we make in life, period. And especially when it comes to that, because it's, not only is it, your life at risk now if you do hesitate, but also other civilians that may be in the vicinity and things like that too, or, the active scene that you went to in a domestic dispute and things like that as well too. So decisions and again, people not hearing everything and making judgment and that's really what it sucks, because you got to, when you have like the regular civilians that are going to the voting polls and passing the levies and they have fucking clue about what that poll is really doing. Like with education, that's why education is just going completely downhill. Right. People go to the voting polls and they see, education. Oh, yes. Without actually like reading what that bill's taking away or what it's really doing. Same thing with law enforcement. The defunding and everything else is the most ignorant conversation that I've even heard within the past couple of years. It's ignorant. It really is.
I don't know where to start. It's insane. So.
Yeah, I mean, but it's that hesitation factor. It's something that you can't train for, and if your mind, you're already telling yourself that, I don't think I'll ever pull the trigger. You're in the wrong field. You really are. You might want to go be an EMT so that you can go in there and see all the other people that probably felt that same way, and they'll allow that hesitation to take effect. Yeah. And so as you're going in there and you're seeing those tens, those hundreds, those thousands of individuals that you're responding to, because they had that hesitation in their mind, to where if they would have, flipped that decision around and made the ultimate decision to where, not necessarily taking the fatal shot, but taking the shot, they wouldn't be lying on that gurney or, others lying on that gurney, so.
Well, I got another little additive to that whole thing too. I had a boss one time that was telling me that I needed to slow down. He goes, "We love what you do, but you need to slow down about 80%. And I told him straight up, this is a big problem, because I had just gotten to my specialty squad and only had a couple of weeks on. And I told him straight to his face, I said, you can't have me slow down. If you have me slow down, you're gonna get me killed, because I'm gonna hesitate because I'm worried about what you're gonna do to me." And I get it, because he's a supervisor and I'm not. I never was. And being able to stand up to those guys, sometimes you just can't do it. And what does that do? That's going to completely demoralize your effect on wanting to actually be out there working hard, And in my case, I was into the stuff pretty much all day, every day. You ask anybody that's ever worked around me, pretty much wants nothing to do with me, because they know I'm going to start shit everywhere I go, which is great. I had a ball doing that. But with that comes a ton of paperwork, a ton of responsibility, and a lot of risk. But, the risk, more often than not, outweighed the reward, or the reward outweighed the risk, if you will. And because I was so well trained, I did everything, not everything, don't get me wrong, I did most things right, and I came out okay on the other side. And when I had to prove that to my boss that, hey man, you guys hired me to do this job for a specific reason. Let me go do my job. If I screw something up, then come at me. But before I even make any mistakes and you're coming at me, that's just not okay. And I had to call them out, So a little rant there. So I'm done.
No, I mean that's good to hear. I mean, because that's really important though too, because it's the, if you go through and you don't really want to speak what's on your mind or how it's really affecting you, kind of going back to, somebody that sits in an office all day and points the fingers to go, hey, go do this, and they don't know what you're facing while you're going and doing that and going on that. You know what I mean? To where, so like Chris, like with you, how does that affect kind of what Christopher just covered? How does that affect and how much truth lies in, what you go through today, especially with the defunding and, well, not really defunding, but minimal funding and, you being short staffed. So there's probably a lot more contention, or dissension really, amongst, law enforcement today than where it was, kind of more, I'm not going to say lackadaisical, but it was kind of like loose, as we said earlier.
Yeah, I think to the point of that stuff and the hesitation, I think that it's one thing to gamble recklessly with your life by hesitating because of whatever process you're going through, because of policies, new laws, public outcry over the profession. But I think the important thing to realize there is you're not just gambling with your life. If you're finding yourself in a critical incident of some sort, if you don't act and you die, or you fail to act, even worse, somebody else is going to get hurt, right? Another officer, or even worse than that, an innocent civilian, right? So there's kind of a priorities of life. Our lives come before the citizens. We've all signed that blank check to whatever respective jurisdictions that we work for. It says, I'll give anything to this cause to do right, anything and up to including my life. And we're willing to do that. And there's a huge amount of selflessness that comes out of that. And I'd just like to take the second, if I may, to recognize Chris and how selfless and vulnerable he is. Through this 20 years and some change career that he had, all the great things that he did, the lives that he saved, he's now retired for now. And look at what he's still doing. He's still selflessly putting himself out there very vulnerably, talking about the innermost demons and processes of the most horrific things that a human being has to go through sometimes for the betterment of his former fellow officers, for the betterment of community itself. And that's an uncompensated thing that he's doing. This is the ultimate selflessness that my boy Hoyer here is demonstrating, right? So this sense of service, it's a profession that we're compensated for. This selflessness is compensated, but that's not what's in his soul. That's not what is in most officers' souls. They just want to serve. They just want to make their community better. They want to make it safer. I've always kind of put the analogy together that when we're in war on the military side, nobody really wants to see the dirtiness of war because it's a very horrific thing. I don't think that man in general, humans were meant to experience and or perform some of these duties that are out there. And that's why so many service members come back and they're messed up at times, right? They've got some consequences and things that they have to deal with from their deployments. But now we televise these things, right? Can you imagine going back to the Civil War, if there was television and pictures all the time of the carnage that was going on during that time, and it was in our own backyards, right? Can you imagine that there would be the support that there was for whichever side? World War One, same thing. World War Two, you weren't seeing these pictures of our young men out there being blown up to pieces and all the different things that happen in war. Do you think that World War II would have been as successful as it was if we were taking pictures of all those things? Now, to compare that to the law enforcement realm, I don't think people generally are that interested in the minutia of the job. I think that generally speaking, people just want to know that they're safe walking to their local grocery store, walking to their church, walking with their kids, riding a bike down the street. That's what they really care about. But when you expose all these things, they see the unfortunate process a lot of times of what goes into keeping our communities safe.
It's
I'm sorry, that
perfect.
was a long-winded response,
Hey,
but
that's perfect. And that's, I mean, that just hit it on the head. It really did. I mean, because it's the, you know, and that's why I always say about the media. I kind of spoke about this in the beginning, where people can be fed anything, and that's always going to what affects their judgment, their knowledge, or anything else like that. Where we as individuals, we only know what we're exposed to. And again, on the point about with you, Christopher, about taking the time to write that book and sharing those stories. A lot of individuals that haven't been exposed to those events, those causes, or anything else, it's foreign language to them. Yeah, I mean, people may go into the career, with that heart as Chris just described, but are they really going in knowing that these tragedies, which with today, I mean, yeah, we do see it a lot more, on the TV, newspaper, magazines, especially with the phones nowadays. So everybody's really exposed to it, but do you really see that carnage every day, as Chris just said, or like domestic disputes? People probably don't even realize the number of like the fatality rate of domestic disputes, and having to go in with the domestic disputes, the mortality rate for law enforcement alone, responding to domestic disputes is the highest of any. A
well, and
lot
not
of
just
people
that. I
don't know
mean,
that.
I was telling Chris this last night. I was on my way into work, came across a horrific car accident, and there was another service member that happened to be on his way home. Helped me extricate this guy out of the car, and he died in both of our arms. So it's that kind of stuff that you deal with every day that brings all that baggage. Now, this guy, I assume by his rank, he's probably somewhere between 15 and 20-year guy. Uh, that had a huge impact on him. It seriously affected him. So I gave him my information to reach up, because it's not just seeing it on TV. It's not driving down the freeway and seeing somebody, a motorcyclist or whatever. As you drive by, you don't really seem to, really comprehend what a fatality is. But when you have some man that, kind of dies in your arms while you're trying to save his life, that has a huge impact. And that's what guys like Chris and people in our profession every day, all day, every day are doing. And I think that we need to realize that there needs to be a process for people to be able to uh, process that and find some sort of cycle for it, and not just pack it away, but be able to talk about it with their buddies, their family within some context, so that you're not taking all that baggage and just holding it because you can't do it by yourself.
100%. And then, now, Christopher, to follow up with what Chris just said, how much of that went into the writing of the book, the holding that baggage? I mean, because that's really important. I mean, like, especially with PTSD today, because a lot of people don't want to actually come out there and admit that. That's why I love that Chris just brought this up about how he gave the guy his number and everything else. That there's so much that people just let carry in their mind, and ultimately that's going to play on hesitation factor, because of what you've seen. And, like, Chris was just saying about the guy, looking at his brass and things like that, he could be like 15, 20-year guy, but just because somebody's is that 15, 20-year guy, did he even see that in his whole career? Nothing to prepare you for, like, if that's that first instance. So, like, with your book, for instance, and you sharing these instances, it's to where being descriptive like that and being able to share those moments to where you can paint the picture to where everything isn't all sunshine and rainbows. It's because the PTSD world is so real today, and people need to know that others are there to reach out to, that others have been through it. So how much of that played into what you did when you were writing the book and putting it out there and going into like training individuals today?
Well, I think you hit it. I mean, the best when you just said other guys have been through it, and there are so many of my friends that have said, "Man, if I had known that other guys had been through the same thing, it would have been so much easier for me to open up." And that was for me. It was kind of selfishly when I started writing it. It was me getting 20 years of really like 19 years of all the shit that I had seen, and because I didn't process it properly, like Chris talks about earlier on in my career, when my 18th year hit and everything just fell apart for me. It wasn't one necessarily bad incident. It was 18 years, of this, and then when three major things happened back to back to back, knocked me right on my ass. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, up until my 18th year, I was having the time of my life still, with all that much time on. Had done pretty much everything you can do. Had all the best training. Did the undercover work. Trained with SWAT guys. I mean, I was having a ball, just a blast. And I can tell you, I got my ass handed to me because of my lack of ability to express the way I do now. And going back to the book thing, when I started to realize, okay, I'm kind of getting off my ledge, I realized, man, there's a whole, probably really realistically 3 generations of people, guys that have been retired, guys that are still on the force, and guys that are coming up, that all need to hear that it's okay to say you're not okay. And I don't care if you've been retired for 20 years, at some point in time, it can be. One of my former colleagues uses this example that this guy had 25 years on and he saw a dog get hit by a car, and that's what broke him. The guy's been stabbed, he's been shot, he's pulled babies out of freaking dumpsters, but seeing a dog get hit by a car was what pushed this guy over the edge. And I don't care how much of a rock star you are, we've all got that breaking point. And for me, I got lucky. It hit me at a really bad time, and I went to, for me personally, which was mostly just kind of being very, very withdrawn, very sullen, very quiet, not doing what I normally would be doing. And that was the worst of the worst for me. But I see guys that have turned, obviously, the worst possible case scenario, suicide, alcoholism, all kinds of other potential things going on there. And the whole purpose of the book later on, as I started getting more and more into it, was that, man, if I can do one good thing that's going to save one guy's life, all the stuff that I went through is absolutely worth it. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now. So.
Awesome. That's beautifully put. Another thing too is that I want to kind of touch base on and see if there's any truth in this, is that kind of when, like you said, the shit stacks up, but it's how much can you admit? And I mean, how much do you guys hold back from admitting because of fear of, being put on leave or having to, go see psych to see if you're even fit for the field? So a lot of people put their career in their heads like, hey, is this going to end my career if I have to admit that I'm going through something, that I'm really drowning here? And like, hey, I know how to swim, but shit, this water's getting deep. I mean, a lot of individuals, they find it hard to reach out because of are they going to listen? Is this going to put me at jeopardy? How is this going to progress forward? So like with both of you, how much restriction do you see amongst, the brothers that you served with and that, Chris, you're currently serving with, that, sometimes, we kind of talk amongst each other rather than talking to our superiors because of that fear of, hey, why don't you go talk to psych, or hey, why don't you go get put on leave? I mean, does that play an effect on being able to share, the tragedies that play in the mind, that, in the progression that you make, thereafter?
That's a very complex question, and I will tell you that I was that guy. It was somebody from our employee assistance unit that found me because I wasn't willing to talk to my boss about it. And the fact of the matter is, I didn't trust the guy. I just didn't trust him to do what I thought that he needed to do. It turned out I was wrong. He actually was very, very good in the very beginning stages, and then as the months went by, he started to kind of flip his switch a little bit and say, it's been a year. Knock your shit off. You should be fine by now. I mean, I probably was. But then something else happens, another critical incident occurs, and then I get knocked back. And then fast forward, another critical incident occurs, and I get knocked back again. And stepping back just a little bit, rewind, I don't really care who you talk to. I mean, because we got this kind of shell about us that, we're tough, I can handle it. Well, guess what? I thought I could handle it too, and there comes a point in time where you just can't. And it doesn't have to be your boss. It doesn't have to be your girlfriend, your wife. You can freaking talk to your dog. I don't care, as long as you're expressing your feelings to somewhere. And I mean, it's obviously not the dog thing. I mean, I joke about that, but somewhere where you can get some positive feedback. And just like Chris mentioned earlier, being vulnerable is okay. Now, great. I mean, don't get me wrong. We're badass. We carry a vest, we carry a gun, we get out there, we get into the great shit all the time, and we're putting our lives on the line. Dude, you made it. You're tough. Okay, you're no longer a recruit. You're out there. You're doing your thing. You're whatever. You're a stud. That doesn't mean that you don't have feelings. It doesn't mean you're not a human being. It doesn't mean that when you pull a dead baby out of a green pool, that's not going to screw you up. Because if it doesn't, you probably would never have passed the background anyways. So, again, kind of getting off track a little bit. But I know, Chris, you're going to have a much better answer, as you always do for these kinds of things. So
You're ridiculous. No, I think that let me first start off by saying that I'm not a tough guy. I'm not a badass. I'm just a guy that tries to do the best that I can for my, I was blessed to be born in America, and I feel that it is my job every single day to earn my position here and to give back to our country that's treated me so well. Um, so I think that it actually takes a tremendous amount of strength, and I think somehow, and I'm not sure how we get there yet, but both in our military and our law enforcement, or I'll just say first responders, because there's so much baggage that comes along with that, and including our hospital staff. Um, we have to figure out a way to normalize talking about our emotions and being vulnerable, because being vulnerable is seen as a weak thing. And from my perspective, it's a tremendous amount of strength and courage to come out and be vulnerable. Um, and Chris had said something about having his employee wellness or unit or whatever, employee assistance. That's a fantastic thing. My agency has that as well, um, and that's good for what it is. But we're being extremely, extremely reactive, and we're poorly reacting. Take away the critical incidents of, the dynamic shootings or stabbings or seeing all the dead people. Let's just take the last year of riots where law enforcement officers across the country have been kicked in the teeth for 10, 12, 15, 18 hours a day, every single day, with no downtime to decompress, no downtime to process, and to not even be able to come around full circle. Here it is 18 months later or whatever, as you keep moving on, and still no process for them to let some of it go. It's all just pent up. Um, at what point are we going to find a release valve for these folks? I think that across the country, you're probably seeing the suicide rate of first responders going up, police in particular, domestic issues, substance abuse, sex addicts with going to find hookers and things like that, gambling issues, pill issues. People are self-medicating in whatever ways they can to try to mask these things, because there's not even enough time in a day when you're dealing with these riots all day to even bullshit with your partners left and right to be able to decompress together. So all this stuff is just building up, and then you have more of these critical incidents. Somehow, some way, we need to bring it back to its core level for basic training or whatever it's the different perspectives are in the military, in your academies, your police academies, your fire academies, on how do we reconcile, how do we process this emotional trauma. It's just trauma, and it's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing, but it's just trauma to our souls, our hearts, our minds. We don't do anything to train up for that. We train to fight, we train to shoot, we train to write reports, we train to talk people down, we train to de-escalate, we train in all these less lethal options, but we don't train ourselves how to process and deal with these horrific things that we come across. How do we get there? How can we incorporate that somehow organically from the very beginning, rather than being absolutely reactive after the incidents?
let me jump in, if I may, on that one too.
That's a great point. I was I was speechless on that one.
Yeah, this is why I want this guy here, because he's a rock star. But it's not just having that training available. It's you've got to be able to get guys to to come to these things, you know, whether it's mandatory or not mandatory, because I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been, you know, training with our SWAT guys and he's going, I don't know where my squad is. Well, in this mandatory training, and they don't show up. It's like, well, how does that work? So you gotta get these guys there first. And then you've got to break that shell, that barrier of, oh, I'm a tough guy, I can handle this. Well, I don't care how tough you are. You know, again, you need to be able to accept that bad things are going to happen. And more often than not, this is just my opinion only, not very popular opinion. There's probably not much you're going to be able to do to stop that thing from happening, anyways. You know, if your number's up, God has made that decision. You know, there's not much you're going to be able to do to stop that. Even if you do, you know, at some point in time, it's going to happen again. So you got to be able to get these guys to be able to break away from that stigma and say, yeah, you know, I really do need this. And oftentimes that's I've found that more often than not when I do public speaking stuff, guys will pull me aside one-on-one because they want to talk outside of the crowd, which is great. I absolutely love that. But getting guys, especially cops, I mean, first responders in general are pretty bad, but cops are the worst about wanting to share their feelings or their emotions in front of other folks. I mean, it's almost virtually impossible. So how do we do that?
That takes senior officers that are respected like yourself. It takes your leaders to be open about it. There's a story that I read somewhere that some sergeant major in Special Operations Command in Florida, in uniform, in the middle of the day, lets everybody know, puts it on his calendar, hey, I'm going to go see the psychologist. And he does this for a period of weeks. He doesn't go in the back door. He doesn't try to make it secret. He walks in so everybody, Sergeant Major so-and-so, United States Army Special Forces Command, hoorah, tough guy, right, is walking into the head shrink. People are like, okay. And after several sessions, you know, he's kind of BSing with the shrink or whatever. And she goes, when can we get down to what you need? Because you seem okay. He goes, ma'am, I'm not doing this for me. I make this appointment every single week just so all my soldiers can see me in uniform, walking up, head up, shoulders back, nice and proud, letting them know that it's okay to come and talk to you. That's the kind of thing that needs to happen so that it can become normal. When you have badass rock stars like Chris Hoyer in front of everybody, God and country, saying, hey, you know what? I can do this. That lets everybody else know that even if some rock star like him or that sergeant major, that it's okay for them to do it as well. And it's just purely at its core leading by example.
And that's a great point, because a lot of individuals don't know. I mean, a lot of individuals know there's help out there, but a lot of times they don't know who that help is or how close to them that help is, because
they don't know that it's okay.
Hey, exactly. You know, and it's just, you know, and the society sometimes demoralizes asking for help or admitting there's problems or, excuse me, I'm sorry, you know, admitting that you have a problem. You know, none of us want to say, oh, hey, I have a problem dealing with this, you know, make us, you know, kind of like, you know, Christopher said, well, hey, yeah. I don't want to say that I'm weak or anything else like that, you know, because if I'm supposed to be somebody that is supposed to be support the foundation for everybody, you know, how much is that really going to affect their, you know, calling on me for support, or, you know, calling out to you guys for assistance when it's oh man, he's saying the head shrink, you know what I mean? Or, you know, in fact, you know, getting that off your chest, you know, getting that and just flushing your mind is actually making you stronger. It's not making you weaker. It's actually, you know, readying you for that next situation that is going to, you know, populate. So, I mean, it's vital. That's why I just love so much that, you know, what Christopher's doing. And, you know, in my infinite wisdom, as intelligent as I am, like when I started this video, I didn't have it like posted for the public. So we've been sitting here talking this whole time, and I didn't even have it posted for the public. But anyway, so I mean, it'll get out there, and people like they'll be able to hear it and everything else too. But I kind of wanted to be able to have the live chats and stuff. But no, I mean, this is so vital. So like with PTSD, for example, you know, it's you know, people think that, you know, PTSD's, you know, limited to, you know, somebody that sustained loss or anything else like that. But PTSD is something that, you know, situations we, you know, face every day, and the stresses, the depressions, the anxieties that, you know, especially come with the job, you know. And I mean, you have to do a moral flush, or not really a moral flush, but I mean, you have to empty yourselves out. So, you know, I mean, and Christopher, I know that book did a big thing for you, and you going in and talking to individuals does it for you. And then so, you know, Chris, if you don't mind sharing, how do you keep your mental flush that, kind of keeps you on your game because you don't have all that just compression, just, swallowing up?
I'll tell you, for me, I live a very stress-free life. I've told this to Chris and anybody that I talk to. Um, for the sake of, and I generally don't just talk words to say words. I try to emulate and act exactly what I'm talking about. So I don't hold anything in. I'm very open. I've been through some things myself, and I talk to people about it. I tell people what my process is. Um, hey, man, this sucks. I'm struggling today. I try to be that sergeant major, right? Um, I'm of nobody of value, no leadership value to anybody, but I am a senior officer, and so I have some experience, and people look at that, and I can say, people ask me frequently, man, you're so ridiculously happy and chipper. It's pretty annoying. How is that, or why is that? For me, because I refuse to give anything or anybody or any organization the power over my happiness. Um, and I think that sometimes we don't recognize or understand that we actually have that power, that we actually give away. Okay, your agency, Chris, is saying that you did some horrible things and you should have turned left instead of right or whatever. All that, you know what I'm going to tell you? Okay, Roger that. I got you. I'm not going to beat myself up about it because I can't fix it. I can't control it. If I can control it and it's doing me ill, then I'm going to do everything I can to fix it, right? It's that, what is it? Something of prayer. God grant me the wisdom to know the difference between the things I can control and the things that I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference between the two. So things that are out of my control, politics, media, people's actions, all those things, I don't worry about them because I can't control them. All I can do is put myself in the best position to be happy for me, be happy for my family, and frankly to give. I'm happiest when I can give of myself, and even in my tough days, because let me be clear, I'm not a tough guy. I cry. I've cried in front of Chris on video calls and several other people. I get angry, but it's probably less than, I guarantee it's less than 10% of my life that I choose not to give it to that. And then when I'm in those down places, I call Chris up. Hey, man, I'm struggling with this. I had this guy tell me something. I won't say specifics, but Chris will remember that I called him and said, hey, man, this guy said this to me, man. I'm not sure how to process this right now, man. Can you give me your input? And he laid it for me clear, man. And I was emotional in that moment because I truly just didn't know how to process it. He helped walk me through it. And man, I'm still a happy guy because I can still give. And when all else fails, I come home and I have a beautiful wife and little girls and a 17-year-old boy that smile at me every day when I walk in the door. And how can you not be happy about that?
Well, I think that's one of the key components to individuals feeling comfortable about going to somebody is that, you know when we ourselves expose ourselves as, regardless of how strong we are and things like that, showing that we do have vulnerabilities, that hey, it's okay for me to release the vulnerabilities, but I can still stand strong while I, deal with vulnerabilities that I do face on a day-to-day basis. And I'm going to keep going back to you, Christopher, too, as far as that goes. It's just, I mean, my mind is blown. I mean, the book's a must read for so many. I mean, it's just that, I mean, because it puts things in real context. Chris was talking earlier about all the gore you see and things like that, that, you kind of go in blindly. Would somebody sign up for the military if they would have seen the bodies upon bodies, laid strewn across the beaches, and, but, even in like in training, you can sit here and watch videos, but again, going back to even that same situation, you taking somebody that's completely unorthodox, they may have a faster trigger, they may have a crazier mind, or be wanting to just end this faster. Again, hesitation factor is always going to play into that. And then without having a clear mind, if you carry all of those, stressors in your life, that's why I wanted to kind of bring up this topic, because it's important. Because if you carry all those stressors, you're going to be focusing on some of those things, or what's going on back home, or the last incident that you had to respond to, rather than the here and now about you responding to, because then that's going to put you, fogged mind, hesitation factor, and ultimately could cost your life, or fellow officer, or even civilian, and things like that. So it's I'm not going to really say how can you prepare yourself for that, but I mean, there are ways, and, Chris just, nailed it on the head that, we have to keep our minds as clear as possible, especially in, facing the things that we face each day. And, it's, so when you go in and do like the trainings that you do, Christopher, based on, the past, how much can you see in their faces or the receptiveness? I know you said that, the guys pull you to the side, like after everything, but, how receptive are you seeing the guys, like when they hear that, this shit's real? It's like, you're not just signing up for some comic book, this shit's, going to come at you. So,
yeah, that's a great point. And the presentation that I do is, I've been doing it since 2017 now. I've actually changed it around just a little bit. And what I try to do is, maybe it's not as appropriate as it needs to be, but it's shock value. And I play some audio from my last critical incident, and I want guys to realize that, hey man, this is what happened. And I'll get briefly into it just for a second, but 4.5 seconds of a gunfight where I watched an officer get killed in front of my face. I had to put down my third bad guy, and I had 3 rounds miss my head by centimeters. I actually heard and felt the rounds go past my head. 4.5 seconds. That's only one very small portion of that entire incident that I want guys to realize, hey man, this is what really happened. And you look at the photos of the scene prior to, it's a very, unassuming cookie cutter style neighborhood. And 30 minutes before this thing happened, I was at the station impounding some marijuana. And next thing you know, I'm literally in a fight for my life, And so I start off with the shock value, and then I show how the transition was from going from the worst day of my life to now living my very best life out here by the beach. And if I can do it, believe me when I tell you, because I kind of feel like I'm nothing at all special. I mean, I'm just a regular guy, like 10 different ways. And despite all the great training that I had, I still, I took it all on board too late. But when I finally figured it out and then realized that there are things that I can do to change my own attitude. And just like Chris says, I mean, there's only so much you can do, and the only thing that you can control is your attitude to how things come at you. And I think that's why him and I get along so well, because I just don't let shit affect me anymore. I'm like, okay, we've got to kind of, you guys don't need to hear this, but we've got an infestation in my kitchen right now. And it's like, okay, call the bug guy, wait for him to show up. What can I do? I can't stop it. I mean, I can do a little bit here and there, but I'm not going to get all stressed out about it and get pissed.
Just to clarify on that, Chris, if I can jump in on you, so it's not misinterpreted here. It's not saying don't care, but there's such thing as caring too much, that it's too much of a burden on you, right? We all care, and it's not like we just throw it back and say, you know what, I don't care. That's not the reality. I care, but there's nothing he can do about his infestation, so he's kind of giving himself to the fact that I just got to wait for the bug guy. We all care. We all continue to do our jobs, but you can't care so much that it's going to cost you everything, right? You can't give what you don't have. And sometimes you need to take a break. And if, to your point, Michael, if you have a bad day at home or there was another incident that you're still dealing with, it might be the best option when you get to work and you're just not feeling it. Say, hey, boss, I need to take a day. I'm not ready today. And that's okay. That's absolutely okay.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, that's maybe the best advice I've heard so far. When you're not okay, take that time for yourself, man. Seriously, because that was one of the things that I did for myself that made such a huge difference in my wellness. I mean, seriously, and then when you get to that point where you can finally admit to that, that's another huge step forward as well. So
absolutely.
How hesitant do you see, fellow officers on taking that day? Because again, it's caring what the next person thinks, or especially when it comes to the superiors about, hey, how's this going to reflect on, my character or my ability to go out here in the streets and do my job efficiently, effectively every day. You know what I mean? Because it's hesitation factor in that essence, to where it's the, hey, if I admit that I need to take me a day for this, how much are they going to be like, oh, hey, are you really cut out for this? And,
Yeah, let me jump in really quick, because I know Chris is going to have a better answer, so I got to jump in first. He always does. I personally think it's a very fine line. it's a fine line between I'm going to be judged if I do these kinds of things versus I really just don't care. And either one of those two is very, very, very risky, if you will, because if you don't care, then people are going to see that and they're going to not want to work with you and these kinds of things. And then that leads down a really bad path. If you're worried about being judged by your peers, what are you going to do? You're going to start trying to act more like they are versus who, like in my case, who I used to be, if that makes sense. And when I mentioned EAU earlier, I made a reference to I'm going to go someplace and hide. And my buddy's like, nope, get your ass in here, sit down. We're going to have a chat. Okay, and he did. He called me to the carpet because he knew, dude, that is not Chris Hoyer. You're not one of those guys that hides. We're gonna call you to your bullshit right now. And he did, and it was like, okay, all right, fine, you're right. And then it all came out for me. So, all right, as you were.
I think that the important key to that is communication. Communicating and like Chris just said, his buddies knew the type of guy he was. He's not the guy that's going to be a malinger. He's not the guy that's going to use every second of his personal time, right? He's a go-getter. He's always there. So I think that from my experience, people don't have a hard time taking time off. We take time off all the time for vacations or whatever. I think that, and I guess maybe you could lie about it, but maybe it's the reason for taking the time. Hey, I need to take a vacation day because I'm going to go boating or I'm going to go ride my motorcycle. I think it's more difficult for people to say, hey, I just need a day because I got a process. And you know what? My advice to that is maybe you don't need to necessarily say that's why. Just take the day. But those that are close to you in your squad, in your unit, they know and that they should reach out, right? And that's where that open communication comes from. Because by God, if we can't trust, we talk about being there and sacrificing ourselves to the man and woman to your left and right. If we can't trust each other with that little bit of communication, how much do we really trust each other? How tight of a unit are we really? Are we taking care of each other? So those are hard questions we need to ask ourselves because look, I don't think there's any macro solution to this problem. It's all going to be grassroots stuff. Individual officers within individual squads and individual units and individual departments to make that more broad realization of being okay and being able to say, hey, I need to tap out and take a day. Furthermore, we all set out on this career for a full career. But you know what? When your career's over, when you recognize that you have nothing more to give and you can take a break. And, Chris has found his spot where he needed to take a break, and now he's getting ready to start some other journey. So he's been able to refill his gas tank, take some of the food off his plate, and say, you know what, I'm hungry. I got to get back in this. I got more to give, right? And that's okay as well. It's okay to tap out of that job. It's okay to tap out of the career because you have to take care of yourself before you can give anything to somebody else.
Well, see, that's the beauty of it, too, because, and I want to touch on that because, sometimes, making those decisions – they're not only what's best for us, but it's what's best for others as well, too, because, look where it led Chris. I keep going back to the book and everything else, too, but it isn't just that book. The book was just a stepping stone for, like, what you do now going into new recruits, the training and things like that, and even the veterans, because by you stepping out, being active, fellow officers in the squad and everything else, you could actually – have your comradeship there and, share different things. But by you stepping out, you expose yourself to hit a broader, scale of individuals that really need to hear the tools that you have, the resources you have, what you've been through, how it's going to better prepare them for stepping into this journey and career and things like that. So it's a blessing that comes from a tragedy that it really is a blessing, and not many individuals know that breaking point, or it's not really even a breaking point. As Chris just said, like being able to know that, hey, now's my time to go ahead and step out. It's best for me. It's best for my family. It's best for my squad. It's best for everything because, when you start letting, the stressors of life, the stressors of the job get to you, and then you're becoming more lackadaisical or the kind of, oh, hey, yeah, it is what it is. Now you're putting your fellow officers' lives at risk. You're putting yourself at risk. The citizens that you're responding to. There's so many different things that you're going to affect because now your whole mind isn't in the game, and you just got to have that mental flush. And sometimes that, if that mental flush isn't it, that stepping out is vital to, our lives, our careers, and the careers of those that follow us, and it's just that it's a blessing that you found your calling. I wish I seen, more officers, doing what you do, Christopher, because it is vital, and especially in the changes that we get with each generation. Like today's generation is just so far like, I don't want to get into that. It's a whole different topic, but I mean, you guys know where I'm going with this because it really is. I mean, you're facing a different generation when you hit the streets every day. So, being ready for that, you're going to have to know, what individuals used to face in the pre years, opposed to what it is now, because, history repeats itself, and the same thing with training and everything else. Well, hey, look, this is what I was exposed to. This is how I dealt with it. And this is what I'm giving to you now so that you're able to deal with it. And it's vital what you're doing, Christopher, and it's vital what you're doing, Chris. I mean, it's just, and having that mind and sharing it with others, because if others don't know that they can talk to you, they're not going to talk to you, unless it's in general conversation, so.
Then you got to be approachable, right? Because a lot of senior cops, I think when you came on, Chris, you'll attest to this, right? Hey, I'm the senior guy, I'm walking around, and it's like, don't talk to me, kid. You got to prove yourself before you can even say a word in the roll call or the write-up room. Hey, sir, can I ask you a question? Don't talk to me, kid. Right? So we got to be a little bit more approachable so that we can mentor that younger generation to come up the right way so they're not dealing with the same struggles. Chris's book is fantastic, but it probably encapsulates about 2 minutes of his complete life. And you got this thick book, and that guy has so much wisdom and so much to give, and it's so fantastic that he's out there doing it.
Well, I can tell you this, man, from my experience. I had a friend of mine reach out to me the other day, and he had about 2 years on me. And I remember I responded to a car accident one night, and it ended up being a DUI. And I had never done a DUI on my own yet. I was only on the street solo for a few months at that time. But I knew that I hated doing accidents. And he was the first one there. He asked me, he goes, well, I'm going to give you first refusal. What part do you want? Do you want this or this? And I said, well, I've never done a DUI. I said, I'll go ahead and take that. And senior guy, a little more senior than I was, not by much. His response to that was, man, that's just like the greatest attitude ever. I just love that you want to try something new. And we're still to like 23 years later, we're still friends to this day. And because he was one of those guys that didn't have that, hey, I'm senior to you, you're going to do this because I was here first and I got numbers on your ass. He was like, dude, that's just awesome. And that attitude, man, it stuck with me, and I never forgot that. And that's how I wanted to be throughout my career, that guys can say, that freaking HOYER guy's a giant pain in the ass, but I can go talk to him, And my girlfriend did the same thing still. She's like, oh, God.
That's vital, though. I mean, that's important.
It's huge. I mean, it's massive. Not only that, but for the boss's side as well, I got unbelievably lucky with the vast majority of my supervisors. And because of their attitudes, not only toward me, but just in general, it made me want to work. It made me want to go out there and break my back for them. And I did. I mean, I busted my hump for them, And unfortunately, toward the end of my career, when I finally got I'm not going to call him a bad supervisor, but the way things happened between us, it kind of got on a level of personality conflict there. I didn't want to work for him. I didn't want, every time I would be sitting in the briefing room and I would see his truck driving in the parking lot, and then I would be like, oh, there goes my day, because I know I'm not doing what I want to do. You know what I'm talking about, Chris. So, and that's how my career kind of ended, with that very negative, bad attitude that I told guys for my entire career. Don't let one or two guys dictate your career. And I ended up being that guy myself, So.
Don't give anybody that power.
Yeah, and I did. I totally, absolutely did. And it wasn't necessarily because he was a good or bad boss or what have you. It was my attitude, and I'll take credit for it because it was all me. But it wasn't just that, because I had multiple back-to-back critical incidents. On my 20th anniversary, my best friend lost his dog in a deployment. So that's my memory of my 20th anniversary. It's like, oh, Jesus, I mean, how do you deal with that, And this is after all the other stuff that I'd already seen. So, that's why my attitude was so shitty toward the end of my career, So.
And how important is it? I mean, I know it's important, but how important is it, going into the career, and even every day that you go out that you go out there, how important is it to know, your weakness as well as your strengths? I mean, we all have to know the things that, kind of like, and what even triggered this in my mind was you being able to say, hey, I don't like accidents, I'll handle the DUI. but there's still like real life in that, to where it's we have to know the certain things that, not necessarily a weakness, but the things that I wouldn't really be able to give my best for, or that I'm not really the best for, and admitting I'm not the best for that, to be able to know, hey, these are my strengths. That's not one of them. How important is that for like the new trainees, plus even the veterans today, because nobody wants to say, oh, I can't do that. Nobody wants to say something like that, but it's vital because, again, with your careers, that's life or death in some instances,
Yeah. Chris, you want to jump in on that one?
I think that it comes down to two words: integrity. All three, I guess: self-awareness and self-reflection. If you can be honest with yourself and understand your faults and own them, then you'll never fail, right? But you have to be absolutely honest with yourself to be able to look in the mirror. And this has nothing to do with being a cop. This has to do with being a good man, a good woman, a husband, a father, a wife, a mother, right? If you can say, you know what, I was pretty shitty today, babe. I'm sorry. I'm not sure what was wrong with me. I was an asshole for absolutely no reason. I don't even know why. I apologize. Man, that stuff goes so far. Me and Chris are in the same squad. I had a bad day and he did something and I chirped at him and I recognized it later that night or the next day. Chris, I don't know what the hell was wrong with me, man. I'm sorry. I was a fucking dick. And I don't even know why. I apologize. But being able to be honest with yourself, be full of integrity, self-aware enough that you can self-reflect honestly, then you can fix that.
I'll take that a step further. I always tell people now, this is one of my new things, that we're talking about critical incidents going back a little bit. If you want to be okay, you will. If you want to keep reflecting on the negative and be a bad person and just be pissed off all the time, people are just going to start to distance themselves from you. But if you can maintain that level of positivity, then people they're gonna gravitate toward you, and that's what we want. We don't want to be shunned. We don't want to be left out of the group. We don't want all these bad things. But if you got a freaking shitty attitude, that's exactly what's going to happen. And unfortunately, we all know this in our profession. There are a lot of guys that are, I'll use the word arrogant because it's true, and
arrogant and bitter.
And bitter and jaded. That's another word I like to use because it's all true, and it kind of comes with the territory. Let's face it, But in my particular case, with firearms, I'm a great instructor. I can teach you everything you need to know about the basics, how to get into gunfights, how to survive, all this great shit. But I suck with a handgun. Flat out, I suck with a handgun. I'll tell you that all day long. And I've tried everything you can do, and I'll tell you right now, I'm not taking a shot more than 15 yards out. But with the rifle, I think I can probably hold my own pretty well, and I know that's one of my strengths versus one of my weaknesses. And it's okay that I say that, I suck with a handgun, but I've tried and tried and tried. I'm never going to be a competitive shooter. So I don't act like I think I know what the hell I'm talking about, for my own personal side. For you, this is what I think you need to do. If that works for you, great. If it doesn't work, then, so be it. So that's just me. But.
And yeah, I mean, not to absolutely echo what you're saying. Don't concentrate and stay on that negative. Recognize it and fix it, right? I mean, happiness, like I said, for me, anything worth having is a bunch of hard work. Happiness doesn't come easy. You have to freaking work for it, right? Success doesn't come easy. You have to work hard for it. So anything that's of value or that makes us happy, it's not just going to be. You have to work at it every single day. Happiness in the job, happiness in your relationships, happiness as a parent. It's something that you're working on incrementally every single day.
Awesome. That's a great point. So I was going to invite him on this. And again, I appreciate you being like, I really wasn't trying to make it last minute. Christopher, you kind of made it the last minute, but because I'd like to have both of you back really and kind of, get this going and everything else too, to where, because this is really an important topic. It's important what you guys do and everything else too. So I have another friend of mine, Ray Bashirs. He's down in Texas. He owns Blue Shield Tactical, and he does close quarter trainings and he does like firearm trainings. He'll get you good, Christopher. But but no, it's like, but it's important though. I mean, because and bringing people together and knowing those, because you can take two strengths of each other. That's one of my other things too, with like strength of each other. Because without you, I'm nothing. Without me, we're all in this together. And it's like when he goes and he travels and he goes inside different, law enforcement squads and he does the different trainings and things like that. It's one of the things that I'll help fund. So a department, because of them not having the funding to maybe reach out and provide that training for the officers and things like that that's needed. Your training on what to expect and things like that. You integrate certain things like that together. Because you take past experience, because he had his past experience. That's why he takes and has so much passion about providing the training for, close quarters defense and, knife training and everything else, because it's you have to be ready for all scenarios, and, what you provide, Christopher, it's a great mental strength for a lot of individuals going in there because, a lot of times, our vulnerabilities in showing everybody else that, hey, look, things affected me too, regardless of how strong I am or was then, and progress forward through that, I still am. But, there's certain vulnerabilities that, kind of, are the cause of, as Chris said earlier, hey, look, this is my time to step out. I'm going off to other things as well, too. But then you take that as a benefit. And now you're able to provide things to individuals that otherwise wouldn't be allotted to them, to yourself, to your family, or anything else like that. So it's phenomenal. I mean,
well, I'm very much a proponent of training, of course, as you guys know, are very well aware. My training consists of preparation before, during, and after, and that includes mental, physical, emotional, and then spiritual. Okay. So the mental game is playing the what if game. The guy comes around the corner with a rifle. What do I do? All these kinds of things. Physical, in my case, I knew that I trained a certain way because I'm never going to be a power lifter. I knew that. I don't have it in my genes, but I can run pretty good and I can kick indoors pretty good. So that's, jumping fences and training for what I did physically and then setting up your gear the right way. All these kinds of things was huge. And then the emotional side is more on the after effect when you go through a critical incident and figuring out, okay, how do I process through these kinds of things? That's a 4-hour class on its own by itself. And then recently, I've gotten not really heavy into it, but I've gotten a lot more into the spirituality side of things where I realize that there are certain things that we're not going to change. We are just flat out not going to be able to change. And recognizing some of these signs that you see, and taking it on board and realizing that, hey man, I had a really good quote. I said, why is it that, we're seeing all this carnage and all these dead babies and all these really bad things? And a really good friend of mine pointed out, he goes, it's not because God's not doing his thing. It's because Satan has a hand in it as well. And I'm like, that makes perfect sense.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so I started to realize that, there's a lot of evil in the world, but, just like Chris talked about earlier, I'm not focusing on the evil. I'm focusing on the good. And if you're focusing on the good, it's going to come full circle. I mean, Natalie and I, my girlfriend, we've got so many stories of paying it forward. It's almost sickening. I mean, it's like, how does this even happen? Because we put
they're an amazing couple.
Yeah, well, she's amazing. She's across the couch from the other side of me, but she's amazing. I'm just kind of following her lead for the most part.
She holding you to the cue cards right now. Hey,
I'm like throwing 20s at her right now, So
that's great. So that's and she did an amazing job editing that book, by the way.
I tell you what, the very first time we actually talked about that, it was one of those things where I'm like, hey, what's your name? Oh, by the way, I got a book. I'm going to give it to you. And she's like, yeah, okay. But then she read it, and then we talked about this yesterday because now things are starting to really take off for us. She said it 3 years ago. This thing is going to be something big. We need to do this. And I'm like, okay, if you say so.
How much of the book did she know about you prior to you handing her that manuscript and being like, oh, hey, wow. You know what I mean? Because that's like a lot of the public, though. I mean, realistically, that's why I loved reading it so much, because it's like, Chris sees things every day that general public doesn't know.
Right.
I mean, he's probably seen tragedies that some individuals wouldn't be able to fathom. You can't make some of this shit up, and it's the, so when you put it into that perspective, and I'm sure she's probably reading this like, hey, well, hey, now I know you a little bit, It's like,
yeah, the funny part was, she reads the stories and she knows me as this totally laid back beach guy. I ride my motorcycle, have fun. I'm like super mellow, and she can't really picture me doing the stuff that I talked about, because the truth be told, I was really no different on the street than I am right now. I mean, I pretty much was always of the attitude of, okay, it is what it is, you know. And I learned this from a couple of my buddies, even though I had it in a different context. It was always ask, tell, make. You know, I'm going to be really nice all the way up until now. Now you force my hand. And then after that, it gets kind of ugly. And I hated being that guy. I always try to talk my way out of fights. But when I'm going hands on with you at the point where now I've got to do something, I'm going to make you understand why it's a bad idea. You know, and I hated being that guy. I really did. I'm very much a pacifist, which doesn't really equate with being a police officer very much. But you know, I'm not a big gun guy. I know what guns do to people. I've unfortunately been in far too many situations where I've seen what happens. So I do acknowledge that I think everybody should have one for their own personal reasons, their own personal defense, or what have you, along with the right proper training. And I mean, I say everybody. I don't mean like criminals. Just to clarify that. But what I like to point out to folks is it's like, okay, yeah, carry a gun if you feel better to have one, personal defense and what have you. But I want you to see what weapons do to people. And I mean, it can go, that's another, like a whole long conversation about, do you understand what weapon retention really looks like? And I can't tell you how many of my buddies, cops, good, well-trained guys have been disarmed by bad guys with, pretty serious training. And for somebody that hasn't really had any kind of training and doesn't do this on a regular basis, like almost every day, the chances of you being successful carrying a gun. So I point out the good stuff and I point out the bad stuff as well. So again, getting off topic here. So
well, that's not really off topic. I mean, because that really is critical. I mean, because it goes a long way into readying yourself and readying those that you're sharing your story with, so that they're better trained in things like that as well too. And for like the civilians that you face every day, or the individuals that you talk to, and sharing that knowledge, because not being properly trained, people think owning a gun they're safe, and the majority of the homeowners that, as you just pointed out, that have a gun, they have it taken from them. At the beginning of this, you were talking about your buddy that said, I don't ever see myself drawing my gun or firing my gun. And it's like, well, you really can't have that mentality. It's like, if you have that gun, you're going to have to know that, come that time, you're going to have to be able to use that. So then with that being said, having yourself properly trained on how to actually, discharge firearm or, de-escalate the situation and everything else, up until that point, but it's a vital topic for individuals to talk about and to consider. It's just, but hey, if you want one, you're like, oh yeah, hey, I'm just going to have a gun. The gun doesn't make you safe. It's the knowledge of what to do in that situation, whether you need the gun, you don't need the gun, or whatever the case may be. But it's still going to be vital to what it is that you do. So
I think that you pray that you never have to press that trigger, not say that I'm never going to.
I've shot a deer.
I know that those things are pretty closely worded, but praying that you don't have to is very different from I'm never going to.
I couldn't agree more. And believe me when I tell you, no bullshit. I mean, I've been through 4 officer ball shootings, and we've all, especially the younger guys coming on board, they all want that curiosity satisfied of, what's it feel like and this kind of thing. Man, believe me when I tell you, after my first one, I didn't want to have it ever happen again. And Chris, you've been in some heavy stuff as well, and it's not something you want to experience. And even though now, I mean, I've got all the experience, I've got all the shit under my belt and everything else. It's all behind me now. I really wish that I never had to go through any of those major critical incidents, even the ones that didn't cost anybody else their life except for the bad guys, which, hey, you know what? I'm not going to apologize for that. They made their decision. I had to react to it, but in a situation where you lose an officer, any one of those 4 that I've been involved with, well, technically 3 plus 1, any one of those, I really wish that I had either just taken a day off or been someplace else. But
it left you with baggage that you wish you never had to carry.
Yeah, it's true. It is true. But I mean, it's no secret. The whole entire reason why I'm here now is because I'm not ashamed of it by any stretch of imagination. I'm very honored that I was there for some of these things that I had to experience, because that's where God put me. And now, based on those experiences, I want other guys to know everything that I went through. Good, bad, ugly, indifferent, what have you. So they can either, again, like I said earlier on, take it on board, take it to the next level or say, dude, you're full of shit. That's not how it is. And I love that. I want the positive and I want the negative feedback. I want guys saying that's not what I went through. Okay, well, let's have a conversation about it. I mean, seriously, because I want to know. I'm never going to stop learning, whether I go back into the law enforcement community as as an officer or a deputy, or if I just stay on the training field. I want to know everything that I can know, in addition to my own experiences, so I can help other guys out, and that's my whole goal in life. So.
Perfect.
Amen.
That's one of the things that I want to kind of like push. It's one of the reasons I wanted to kind of, bring you on here and, have this discussion, and everything else too, because, I'm a big advocate for law enforcement, proper training, taking the what was and kind of integrating it into the what is right now, because it's a topic that a lot of people ignore. Training, is so underfunded. I mean underfunded. So that's why, like, I find different ways that I can to implement certain strategies in, bringing individuals in like yourself, Ray Bashir's, now I got another resource with Chris.
Oh yeah.
To where it's because it's it's a big topic that is not discussed.
Right.
It's like, hey, they're doing it.
And it's really not that complicated. I mean, I remember when I first got my rifle, and I didn't have an opportunity to go out on the range all the time. So as crazy as it sounds, of course, I found a safe place to do it. Closed the door behind me and turned off all the lights, and I sat in my dark closet, completely lights out, and I did magazine exchanges for hours and hours and hours and hours. And when it came time to do a magazine exchange in real life, a critical incident, I didn't even realize I did it, And so, just again, sitting in a closet, or I know you read the book, the cat toy. I freaking strapped a cat toy to my freaking barrel because I couldn't afford a laser light. So that's what I did. And I walked up and down the freaking range for hours and hours and hours, getting that thing to where I wasn't bouncing around like this and these kinds of things. Very, very simple, extremely cheap. And if as long as you're creative and you can figure out other ways to do these kinds of things. And believe me when I say I'm not an advocate of defunding, and that's a whole other thing by any stretch. But there are times when you got to go out on your own and spend your own dime and figure out how you can do better things your own way. So
that's a great example though too, with the cat toy and everything else too. So, like when I always tell people about repetition, like, training your mind, training your body, I always use the Buddhist monks sitting on that hill, just standing there all day, just going like this. And it's that repetition to where it's involuntary after a while, to where it's a spontaneous reaction to where, like Chris was talking about at the beginning of this, about, how the action's always going to be faster than the reaction. However, if you do that repetition, that magazine exchange is going to be just a blink of an eye. It's not even going to be a thought. You're not going to tell yourself, hey, I better change this magazine. It's just that, it's a done deal. So that, that repetition and, driving that in individuals too, to where, and same thing with training, or that same thing with having discussions, having that repetitive discussion with somebody, repeated, Sergeant Major going in there with his, head held high, shoulders back, going in there week after week after week to go see the head shrink. You know what I mean? It's that repetition and people seeing that repetition that it just becomes programmed in their own mind. So it's important what you do. It's important what you both do. And it's just, we need to have more of it and, kind of in exposing it to, the new trainees coming in, the veterans that are already doing it, because there's so many veterans today that they feel suffocated because of the restrictions that are being placed, or, the lash outs that, other individuals are like, putting into the shit they're throwing in the game.
Yeah.
So it's just that, having somebody to go in there and speak to them and just kind of, force the engagement. You know what I mean? You're just forcing that conversation, because a lot of people try to play it in their back of their mind and pretend that sometimes it doesn't exist, but it's real life. And it's that real life that they pretend in their mind that it doesn't exist. It's setting themselves up. It's setting their squad up for, the repercussions that, could be coming. So,
well, I'll tell you what I say, and this is what drives me crazy about a lot of the scenes that I've been on, is the statement of, this is how we've always done it. And I know Chris and I have talked about this a lot. It's like, well, that worked 30 years ago. And even for me, I'm one of those guys where I'm like, well, this has always worked for me. I'm going to do it this way. Well, that's stupid if you think about it, because you need to evolve, especially in today's climate. Now, like my former agency, they're huge into red dots. Everybody's carrying red dots on their pistols. I tried it, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't even. it's not going to work for me. I'm just going to go back to the old way.
That's the new cat toy.
Yeah, exactly right. You know, and so, so being progressive and being able to accept change, which cops hate more than anything. If it's somebody else making that change, like when somebody gave me like the 2006 Crown Vic and I wanted the 2007, I'd be like, no, I can't drive that car. No way. Come on. If it was me picking that car, nobody would care. Right. You know, but you got to be able to
now you got the Chargers.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Right. You got to be able to shut down those barriers and say, you know what, maybe change is good from time to time. And some guys, you're just not going to change flat out. You're not going to change them. That's just how they are. That's how they're built, what have you. But if you can be, I love reality-based training. That's one of my biggest things. If you get some reality-based kind of training in there and say, look, man, this is the direction this is going. I don't like it any more than you do, but this is how it's going to have to be. You know, and if you don't leave them a choice, sometimes that's just the way, you know, they got to adapt whether they like it or not, you know. So
a scared straight program for law enforcement officers.
There's a new reality show.
Scared straight for law enforcement. That's awesome. So, I mean, is there any other topics you guys want to talk about today, or?
I think we've kind of hit on just about every type of thing, haven't we?
Pretty close, yeah. You know,
officer wellness,
survival,
critical incidents.
Yeah.
I mean, because I want to have you guys back on. You know, I mean, and of course, I have the link for individuals to get your book. It's needed. You know, months ago when you and I first started conversing and everything else too, and when I first purchased the book and everything else too, I brought it up to you that, you know, I feel it's important, and I would like to actually, you know, go inside different law enforcement, whether it be municipalities, the counties, the cities, you know, even states, to where, you know, I really believe that is something that would be beneficial to them to read. To kind of like, because as they read that, they're going to see the exposure of themselves as well too, of, you know, because sometimes when you see that, oh man, again, going back to the PTSD and, you know, us playing and doing that whole mind fuck, excuse my language, but of like, nobody else will understand. There's nobody else to talk to, you know, it brings it to real life. It really does, you know, and I believe they need to have that. And, you know, kind of, I really kind of like to expand it out too, to the follow up of the, hey, here's the man behind the book, you know, because that in a real life training, because it puts even a bigger push on the reality of it. You know what I mean? I mean, it's vital. It really is. And I mean, I commend you, and I won't quit commending you for what you have done and what you continue to do, because, you know, like Chris said earlier, like knowing when to step out, but you really haven't even stepped out, man. I mean, what you're doing today, it's even a bigger cause than what you did before. It really is.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I got to throw a shout back. I mean, you've mentioned the book a dozen times, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. I mean, I'll be honest with you. When I started writing it, I didn't think it was going to be anything more than just me writing my own stories, and never really thought it was going to be anything more than just something on my laptop. And now here we are. So kind of switching gears just slightly, if you like, I mean, I love doing this, even though I suck at reading. Even though I couldn't write a police report in 20 years, I can write a book. I don't know what that's all about. But if you would like to, next time we come back around, I can start reading a chapter here and there, you know, and having people hear kind of straight out of the horse's mouth, because I think I wrote better than I can articulate. You know,
you see, with that being said, you know, going back to what I was saying earlier about my infinite wisdom, when I set this up, where like the comments weren't available for individuals to, I had it on the restricted, so people couldn't comment the whole time that we've been doing this video. And I'm just sitting here like, I'm looking over here to the right hand side, just like kicking myself in the teeth right now. Like, and then I had it blocked to where it wasn't even on public. So even though I put it onto the law enforcement sites and everything else, it was like still restricted to, it was private. I'm just like, oh yeah, hey, pat on the back.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to hear this. Here, let me block it out.
I know, you know, I tell you what, man, I go back sometimes. By the time I got done, you know, Natalie and I were finishing it up, and I had read it so many times and added a few things here and there in between some of the stories. Man, I was so sick of it. I didn't want any part of it anymore. I'm like, just get this shit out and let me be done with it. And then you fast forward It came out a year ago in March, and every so often I'll go back and I'll read a chapter, and I'm like, my God, it almost sounds like I know what I'm talking about here, I mean, but at the time I swear it was nothing more than just me throwing shit down on paper. And as it turned out, I mean, a lot of people are responding way better than I ever expected. I had a really, really close friend of mine, lost an officer from another agency, and a relative of that officer read it and has never met me before. She mentioned to him that it was almost like I was reading it to her, and has never even met me. And I'm like, how do you get a bigger compliment than that? I mean, that is, for me, that
And
is
not
so.
that you needed more credibility, because the book's credible enough, but it was endorsed by Colonel Dave Grossman, so that absolutely has to say something, right?
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, Dave's a good dude. That was probably one of the biggest honors of my entire life, was when I reached out to Dave and I said, hey, just, do me a favor to take a look at it. And he came back and said, a quote that he said basically was the best law enforcement book he's ever read. And I'm like, okay, well, I wasn't aiming for that high. All I wanted to do is put your name on it. But, and, I mean, I'm still on the side of, again, it's just my thoughts and my stories and some prayers and stuff like that. And as it turns out, people are responding in a pretty positive way. And I love that they are. And again, it goes back to, I want the feedback. I want people to say, dude, I think you're full of it, or no, I love what you wrote, or, I'll never read it again. I like that you wrote it, but whatever, I'm going to go on to something bigger and better, which I like that too, honestly. So.
I love the whole, I mean, what really does it, I don't know if this was like, part of like Natalie's role and everything, or if it's how you wrote it down, which that's what makes, great editing happen. Like I write, but it's not never like put it out there, but it's just like, putting the sequencing that book has of the beginning to end of, where you've seen yourself in the beginning, what made that ultimate decision, and then progressing forward, and of course, what you faced, during your time in, and then, the ultimate tragedy, and then the stepping out aspect of it. I mean, the sequencing of that book it's flawless. It really is. And I mean, because it puts everything in a perspective. So, I mean, that book is relevant to, the cadets, going through training right now. It's relevant to the trainees that are already in. It's relevant to the veterans in the game. It's relevant to the individuals that have retired themselves, because everybody is still dealing with that real life, regardless.
Again, when I wrote it, I didn't have anything planned at all. I mean, nothing was planned in that book. And when I finally got it done and I sent it off to her, there's actually an entirely second book we're working on that as we speak as well.
The teaser.
Yeah, right. And so now we picked the stories that she thought were the most impactful, and took out a few that, were, I'm not going to say inappropriate, but definitely more on the side of there's no way kind of thing, which, some stuff that, Chris, this as well as I do. If I hadn't been standing there watching this in front of my face, I never would have believed it, so there's some shock value in some of the newer stories. But when she got her hands on it, she took it to the next level. And I mean, again, for me, when I first started it, the whole thing was all in caps, because that's what we do, right? Yeah, no, we're not doing that. And then she came and formatted it, and very, very, very wisely, which I would have never thought about in a million years, that, she spaced it for cops, because we're cops. We don't really, and I've heard several people look at it now and say, I've had other books to where the print is so small, I immediately lost interest in wanting to read it, because it was like, you having to do this, where the way she did mine was designed for cops to be able to read easily, which is good, because,
So 47 chapters fit on 10 pages is what he's trying to say.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. But yeah, since I couldn't write a police report, it was kind of like, well, where's my crayon, But it is, I admit, it is a very easy read. And that, again, wasn't by design either. That's just, me throwing it out there, and put my heart on my sleeve. And, well, now he's over here. She's taking credit for the whole thing now. So there's more 20s, So
good for you, Nat.
Yeah, right. So,
it was by design. On this side, anyway.
On her side. For me, it was just throwing my heart on the sleeve and just throwing it out there. And as it turned out, it actually worked out pretty good. So,
Well, it's vital. It really is. I mean, it's just that people see the cruisers driving by. They watch TV. They watch the cops and robbers shows and things like that. But it's so when people do read real life, it's like, oh yeah, right, man. That's exaggeration, but there's no exaggeration to the tragedies, the traumas, the horror that really does exist. I mean, it's the you can't plan for it. And it's that again. That's why I like the title of the book and everything else. When that day comes, training for the fight. It's when is that day? It's every fucking day that you get up, you put your clothes, and you go. And it's not a 9 to 5 job. I mean, that's something that is just it's always on your mind. You're always gonna, and because you're doing that for the community, for the city, for the world. I mean, the country as a whole. You also bring that back home for your family. So it's not a part-time job.
right.
And there's always going to be tragedies that we face, but again, the importance of being able to have that filter, being able to do that mental flush, and it has to be done frequently or whatnot, but it's vital, and your story is just so laid out. And I mean, sugarcoating that's what's caused a lot of today's generation. I mean, let's be honest, but it's just people need to hear the bold truth, and a lot of people like, oh, when they hear the bold truth, it's like, yeah, right. It's like, well, okay.
I was that guy. I was that guy. We heard a story in the academy, and I'm like, that's bullshit. That doesn't happen. And then fast forward, and sure enough, it actually does happen. So,
Maybe for the next conversation, we can dive into somewhat about the families, because I think that is something that touched me, Michael. What you said is, we go out and every day is that day. Chris, tell me if you think I'm a liar if I'm speaking out of school here, but I don't think that I've ever gone to work thinking that day was going to be the day. However, I was trained for it. I was ready for it. But here's one thing that I can almost guarantee to a family member. Every time mom or dad walks out that door in that uniform, they say, I hope this is not the day that comes.
yeah, oh yeah.
Right? I've never carried that burden, ever. I've never felt like I've worked a day in my life because I love what I do. My family, on the other hand, they're like, oh my God, please don't let this be the day that some cop in uniform, in a dress uniform with the chaplain's coming to my door.
Yeah, that could be more true. I mean, that's absolutely.
And that maybe we need to dissect that a little bit too, and recognize them, because from my perspective, they sacrifice so much more than idiots like us. And they also have to find that decompression time and have that time to be able to let some air out of that balloon so it doesn't pop for them as well.
100%. I'd love to have that conversation. I mean, because it is vital. I mean, it really is vital to everything. I mean, and it's again going back to what people know and what people see, the perception. Perception is always important. I could tell somebody, "Hey, go clean that toilet," and they could think that I meant just wiping around the bowl on the inside, where I meant like wiping the tank down the base of the toilet around it. It's about perception. So people see what they what they're fed, but how much reality is there? So you take
Right.
Christopher's book, you know what I mean? All of a sudden, here's that reality that this is really what goes on when people are out there in the streets and things like that. Now, what's the realities of the family members sitting at home? Because family of law enforcement, they do know some of those realities, but again, not all officers share what they see because they don't want to put that burden on their families or kind of pollute their minds with the traumas, tragedies, and things that you were just.
They're carrying that burden no matter what, no matter how much you try to protect them, they're carrying it.
Well, I'll tell you guys from experience, that's a huge mistake to not share. Now, does they all need to know all the specific details of what you did today? No. But I can say right now, I walk in the door and my family knows what kind of day I've had based on the look on my face, or if I go straight to the room, and shut myself away or these kinds of things. And a little bit off topic here, but for the guys that are watching that may have not gone through this yet, I've got a chapter that's very, very close to my heart about answering the phone. And my ex-wife was forced into answering her phone at least that I can remember 6 different times when I was on the street. And we had that rule early on in my career that, hey, if I'm at work, I don't care what you're doing. If that phone rings and you don't recognize that number, answer the phone. Because more often than not, it's not me calling, it's somebody else calling on my behalf. And my biggest fear was that God forbid something happens and she finds out about it on Facebook or on the news or from some other source, because that's exactly what happened on my last critical incident. Um, the now widow found out from the desk aide what had happened, basically just off of a name, and that's absolutely unacceptable. I mean, you can't do that. So I get into much more eloquently in the book about answering the phone, but that's the basic message to guys that are kind of still out there doing their thing. So
And every single one of those phone calls, let me point out, is a critical incident for those family members.
oh,
It's a
absolutely,
very traumatizing thing. Hello, Mrs. So and so,
yeah,
and their heart's got to drop in the pit of their stomach because they don't know what's next. They're gonna assume the worst.
yeah. And those ones where I've one particular time I had 2 IVs in me, I physically couldn't get to the phone, and the first thing I tell my friend, I'm like, hey, call this number and make sure the very first words out of your mouth are,
He's
he's
okay.
okay. You know exactly what I mean. So after that, then all the tears, then they can cry, and then they can be pissed, whatever the situation is. As long as they know you're okay, and then go to the next conversation, whatever.
Right.
So,
He looks like Swiss cheese, but he's okay.
yeah, right. So,
But I mean, it is a real topic. I mean, we really do need to have that, man. I mean, I'm blessed that you guys, jumped on here, and I do want to kind of schedule one and make this happen. And I'd like to have it as an ongoing topic. That way, you guys can invite more on. We can kind of expand the actual viewing crowd and things like that as well too, to make individuals understand that this is an important topic. It kind of gets swept under the rug until something happens on the TV, or somebody reads a newspaper. Oh my God, I can't believe they did this. Well, what happened? Well, it says. Well, yeah, it says. But
well, I know me and Chris both have our opinions on critical incidents, but if we get to that point where we want to talk about why, like, I'm not going to throw it all out there now, of course, but the officer that pulled their taser versus a gun, I know how I can break that down to make people understand why she did what she did, and those conversations can come up as well for people that don't know. Again, it just boils down to a lot of the training and her experience and these kinds of things. So that could definitely be a topic as well. So
we can make this a weekly thing.
say again.
We can make this a weekly thing. Seriously, I'd love to have this conversation weekly.
I'm down. Absolutely, heck yeah. So
and I want to have like a separate conversation with you too, as far as about what I'm saying about like the books inside the different municipalities, cities, counties, states. I mean, because they really do need to read it. They need to hear it. They need to maybe even see you come in there and kind of just put that extra oomph into the book and everything else too, and give that.
You're changing lives, Hoyer. You're changing lives.
I don't know about all that, but I'll tell you, my dream now that it's kind of taken off is for it to be the next Dave Grossman, where it's required reading for law enforcement, and I'm still not 100% convinced that it's at that level. I can tell you this: you're probably not going to go wrong by reading it. You may or may not learn something from it, but it may just make you laugh. I mean, that might just be enough for you to want to read it.
It'll make you laugh for sure.
Well, you'll learn something too, even with the veterans. I don't care what anybody says. If somebody makes that comment, they're either ignorant, dumb, or blind. Period. Yeah. I'm being dead serious. I mean, because everybody we meet knows something that we don't. Period. You know what I mean? Right. And then sometimes in that story to where Chris has seen things in his career that you may not have even had to be exposed to in your career, Christopher, and vice versa. Right. And there's so many out there that and the biggest question, and again, how your book, the title and everything else for when that day comes, it's just that so many individuals are going out there that they get so lackadaisical or complacent in their jobs because they're just so used to, again, repetition. If all you're seeing every day is the traffic stops, everybody's just handing you their IDs, their insurance, everything else. So you're just so complacent with that. You walk up to that one vehicle to where an individual is just not so compliant. It's that's that day, and it's just that. And because you've been so complacent for so long, you're the victim now.
I keep talking about how I'm downplaying the book and like it's not a big. It actually is a pretty big deal, and I'm very, very proud that I was enough part of the whole situation to where I had, I'm going to call it the necessity and or the obligation to write it, and and I'm very happy that I was I was that vehicle now to where I had to be pushed forward to make it happen. And again, if one or two guys, it saves a life, or it just changes how you do things, and somebody else gets their life saved because of what you did, every single thing I did was worth it. So,
and that's what matters, And again, I keep touching on what Chris said earlier. It's perfect on, knowing that when to step out, because you really haven't stepped out, but you just took a different course. But you knew that, hey, you know what? If I continue to serve at this level, it's just not going to be for me, and it's probably going to be counterproductive than it is for the best. And you took that, and I mean, what you did with that is it's a blessing. It really is. I mean, and I love how humble you are about not thinking that the book's really that big of a deal, but it's huge. It really is. I mean, that's why I'm talking to you right now. That's why I want to promote it to where, I mean, people need to hear this. It's a topic that, so many people try to ignore or sweep under the rug, but it's real life that, keeps myself, my family, my business, everybody that I care about, safe, protected, and everything else like that too. So it's something that I want to promote. I want to continue the conversation, and I want to make everybody else to have that conversation too, because it needs to be had, period.
Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. And for guys that aren't sure, if you're not really sure, check it out on Amazon and listen to some of the Audible portion of it, and just read the back cover. And
that's what I need to do. That's what I need. Well, that's what I need to do, because I had because I didn't put the Audible part on there. I'm pretty sure what I put on there was the actual book. I need to put the Audible part on there too and make that note too. So I'm glad you just brought that.
Also, it's kind of weird the way it happened, because we've got the original book that came out in March of last year, and then we did the updated version at the same time that the Audible version came out. The Audible version is still the original book, and now the new Dave Grossman endorsed version is a whole nother thing. So when guys are looking for it, you've got the original one, which is, Chris, what is it, 37, 39, 40 some odd chapters? I don't remember. But
42, I think.
Yeah, something like that. And then a new one has 4 brand new chapters added to it with Dave's endorsement in the very front and his forward. But then again, like I said, the Audible is the original version without those 4 chapters. And that just was more of a matter of timing on our side. And so when you're looking for it, sometimes it's kind of hard to find that newer version. But like I said, just look for Dave Grossman's name across the middle of the book and you'll see it. So.
You'll get a call from Disney to be a voiceover.
Yeah, right. This is the record. This is one of Natalie's favorite parts. I didn't actually do the reading, but the guy that did do it is a spokesman for Dunkin' Donuts. So Dunkin' Donuts, presents a cop book. So it's perfect.
That's kind of the irony and the blessing and shit.
Exactly. Yeah. So.
That's awesome. Well, hey, I appreciate you both greatly. But message me and kind of find out how you want to schedule this. I mean, because Chris, I don't know your schedule. I mean, that's something you can kind of, keep with you guys and everything else like that. But you're trying to find a schedule. I mean, we can alternate. It doesn't have to be the same day each week or something like that. But I would love for the both of you be during the conversation every time. And, fellow officers now active, or Christopher, the ones that you may know that been through traumas and things like that as well too. We need to expose that, because the more that we expose that, and that we all have like real life problems, the more that individuals that are still active, that are afraid to go talk to, not really afraid, but afraid to go talk to somebody, or they feel that it's going to hinder anything or make them feel lesser or seem lesser to somebody else. I mean, we really need to have that conversation. That way, more individuals have the conversation. They come out and talk to others about it, because as they step forward, the next individual will step forward, or, it's to come together. I mean, we have to, I mean, it's a brotherhood for a reason, and it needs to, be reinvented in that aspect. And again, that's one of the services that your book can do, because it does need to reinvent the brotherhood as far as what it's there for, and sisterhood and everything else. But it's if an individual can't walk into that, roll call every day and know that everybody that's in that room is truly for you, and that you can truly go to them and vice versa. Some people won't admit it, but that's really how it sits right now. Some people stay reserved and they just go in there just to do their job and just, make it through. But it needs to be heard and need to, open people's minds to it as well.
Well, that's an absolute life-saving technique, and it's a career-saving technique as well. So I realize I haven't shut up in the last half an hour. So Chris, you want to jump in and shut me up for a while? So.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, Michael, and Chris. Thanks for having me on here as well. It's a truly humbling experience. I hope that through venues like this that we're absolutely able to help positively affect officers' lives, and help them recognize that they have a lot more power in their own process, their own emotional and mental health, than what we think we do. We have so much more. So I implore everybody to search your inner self and find out your way to recognize that you have that inner strength and that power.
Amen, brother. Amen.
Perfect. It was a pleasure, you guys. You guys stay blessed, and thank you for your service then and now.
Cool.
God bless you. Thank you so much.
Always,
All
God
right,
bless.
guys.
All right, bye-bye.